Good morning all and welcome to this edition of Friday Focus. Thank you for being here. Please again, wherever you're watching around the world, thank you for joining us. We're broadcasting here on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Substack and Spotify. These are recorded episodes as we're coming to the summer. Our guests are busy at the end of the year doing a number of different things. And we will be broadcasting through the summer and then out into the new academic year. So please, as we say every time, we love you to get involved in the conversations that we take part in. Comment, link, subscribe, share. If you leave a comment, we will respond to you. It may not be immediately, but we will come back to you. If there are questions you've got to ask or there are things that you want to contribute to the conversation, please do get involved. We say many times over, join the conversation, please do. Now, my guest this morning is Sir Mark Grundy of Shireland Collegiate Academy Trust. Many around the system will know of his work and he's been influential in the academy system for many years. But it's a real pleasure to have Sir Mark join me this morning and get involved in this conversation around what we see of the education process. So good morning, Sir Mark. Nice. I really appreciate you being here.
Well, morning, Chris. Good to see
you. Just your introduction. I've told you where you are, but tell us a little bit about your journey and the process that you've gone through with your trust and other work that you're doing.
Yeah, so my trust is in the middle of the country. So we are 4 or 5 miles south of Birmingham, the second city. My trust is a mixed academy trust. So we've got 2 nurseries, 7 primaries, 5 secondary schools, high schools, 3 sixth forms and an alternative provision centre. So 7,000 children, 1,000 staff, all from quite economically deprived communities, without exception. So not the most economically rich, but definitely the most culturally, creativity rich group of people. So yeah, that's us.
And you've been there for a number of years. So.
Yeah. So I came to Shireland in 1997. I was the principal of what was then Shireland High School, moved it through to be a language college and then academised in 2007 with another school that we ran at the time. So we ran another school called George Salter, which was 10 minutes away from here. And we'd taken it from special measures to actually outstanding in 4 or 5 years. And then the trust has grown from there. And a mix, Chris, a mix of schools. So the free school program that we have in England, we've taken advantage of. So 4 of my schools are free schools where either the Department for Education or the local authorities come to us and said, will you open a brand new school for us from scratch? There's obviously a need in the area. So we've got a secondary school and 3 primaries that are all under the free school program. And they're very different, but they add a definite richness to what you can do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the work of Smart Curriculum, we work across all of the sectors, so all of that view, and it is quite an interesting perspective to see curriculum design shaping schools, meeting the needs of communities, hearing the voice of parents, particularly in the free school arena. What's been the biggest driver for you in the communities that you've worked with? Because the reason that these schools are built is because the provision hasn't met the need. And so what's been the biggest driver there?
So I think the free school program has been interesting because it started with, obviously there wasn't enough capacity, but there wasn't enough good and outstanding capacity. So when the program started, actually it was to replace existing schools. I think our Department for Education realised fairly quickly that actually that probably wasn't the way to do this, so pared back on it. So I mean, our greatest driver it's really simple. It's how do you make sure the children get the best possible set of experiences, and you support the staff, but also you are an integral part of the community. So my biggest challenge with the free school program was trying to get the powers that be to let me do it slightly differently, so I could actually bring families in and the community in and do things in the way that we wanted to. And some of the frustration was at a time when our government were committed to an English English baccalaureate that we felt narrowed the curriculum. We wanted to build schools that opened it up and made it more inclusive and more outreaching, but also in-reaching. And without the right sort of environment, you can't do that. We've always had a very simple sort of mission. It's how can I make as many kids experience irresistible learning as we possibly can, so they just want to do more and more and more.
Yeah. And I take from that, in a sense, one of the markers of that is individual success. And a child is motivated by that mastery. They're successful.
Yeah. And then next door to that, yes, you want that pursuit of excellence or that pursuit of individual excellence, but you also want them to experience so many things that otherwise they wouldn't experience. And obviously in the communities that we serve, things that sometimes we take for granted for our own children, we feel we should at the very least replicate that for the children in our care. So lots of work in our curriculum design on all sorts of curriculum enrichment, extension, moving into areas that otherwise they simply wouldn't experience. Lots of experiences outside of school and lots of experiences of people coming into school.
Yeah. That's resonant of the conversation I just had with Dr. Gergras. He was talking about that the experience is the forgotten factor in schooling, and he challenged us in that conversation around having the 11 things. In fact, I don't know why 11 was particularly the number, but what would we put in front of children? What would we make sure that all of them do? When I was leading school, we had our entitlement curriculum, and we said there are things that we wanted the children to experience because we knew that they wouldn't. Some of them might have had it, but they wouldn't enrich their lives and open the doors.
And I was very fortunate, Chris, in that in the early part of my career, I got to work with Tim Brighouse and Mick Waters.
Yes.
And some of the work that Tim was doing when he was in charge of Birmingham was very much about making sure that there was a whole entitlement set of experiences that he pushed, but he also facilitated. And inevitably, when you get to work with someone people as impressive as those two, it rubs off, and you go back and why would we do something the same or at least something similar? So a lot of the things that I experienced working with Tim, you will see in the Shireland schools, and you'll see them consistently delivered. So, because I think the other bit that sometimes differentiates us from others is we like systemic offer, not heroic offer. So doing it with a class group is lovely, much better than not doing it at all.
Yes.
But it's not good enough. Actually, if it's a really important experience or extension of something or input from somebody, then it should be all of the youngsters in that cohort. So our delivery of our curriculum has always been very structural.
I mean I'm glad to hear that, and I think we need to be talking more about that at system level. That there are things that every child should have or has a right to experience, and therefore across these systems that we make sure that they get that opportunity. And I take it. I mean that's because you've got that all through perspective. You're seeing it right from nursery through to sixth form provision, that there are entitlements that all learners get right across the school.
And what of the? I mean, there's lots of reasons why having a mixed structure like ours is just wonderful. But what one of the massive benefits is you can actually have post-16 students working in an early year setting. Yes. You can have Key Stage 4 students working with Key Stage 2. I mean, it should be the norm, but there are lots of secondary schools where the sixth form never do anything in terms of supporting younger youngsters in school. Yeah. I think if you get the mixed environment that we've got, you get all those sorts of cross connections, and you get those offers of help, and they make such a difference. As much as I'd love to think that when, as a teacher, I went into a class, I made a huge difference all the time. I wouldn't have ticked everybody's box, but actually, when you bring your peers, you bring older brothers and sisters, you bring somebody from another of our settings into another setting, it's just completely different. The dynamic is it's there's a sort of informal rigor because actually there's an expectation I'm going to do it really well, but it's not that normal teacher-student relationship.
Yeah.
That on something that's really well planned, and you get some really clever experiences that are sticky, and kids want to be part of them. So that's definitely been a strength that we've done more and more work in that area over the last few years.
And it's not one that, I mean, we all know, the Education Endowment Foundation Research Collection. There's not, I mean, there's a really good piece in there on the activities of peers and the fact that peer learning is so strong. And the research does tell us that learners learn best from learners, and that really does have an impact.
So we had an exceptional young man in one of our sixth forms. And one of the bits that I've done this year is persuaded him to come and be the advocate for student voice in a sort of, in essence, our student governance structure, but working beyond that.
Yes.
The results have been staggering. The uptake of youngsters saying, I want to do what he does. How do I expand what we're going to do? And I think it just brings home that I think at times we let people go that we shouldn't let go. And yes, he had to convince me that he could still start the first year of his degree, and I wasn't going to cause him all sorts of pressure. But I've just watched him grow and us flourish, and what a perfect way to create a really good role model for other people to go, actually, I can do this. I can be brave, and I can go and do these things. And that's been one of our high points of this year. And there'll be more because actually what he's now done is take the genie out of the bottle. So what I've had for the last few months are lots of sixth form students and year 11s saying, can't I do an internship, or couldn't I do some of this, or I think I could really help in year 6. And they're great things to hear.
But it not only does it say that they're invested in the process and they see the value of it, they will then turn around and want to give something back. I mean, that civic contribution can only have benefit later in community, can't it? I mean, I can do something.
And I think the enrichment benchmark structure that's been coming out of the department for the last few months, and it inevitably will have a civic element to it, is great, provided because it's real and it's authentic. Yes. And I think what we're seeing with a lot of the things we're trying to do is to make sure that it's not just another thing where people go, well, it's the 5th of this number of strands here. We need to do something. Let's go and get them to do this with the local, whatever. Yeah. Actually, what you want is something that is really authentic and actually becomes something that everybody wants to do. So again, it creates that expectation. This is an annual thing. This is not something we do to tick a profile. It's something that actually adds a richness to how we're working, but also changes the dynamic. We've definitely seen that this year.
Do you see that? I mean, that I know your work with the DFE. You've been asked to work with. I'd use the troubled organisations, so that those that have got themselves into difficult situations. And there's been, this wasn't necessarily the way the conversation was going to go, but I'm interested in that point that. We've got into a system that's got such high accountability that people are going into tick boxes. We're doing this and we've met that. Yeah. But what you've just alluded to in design is a kind of level of intent, a level of belief in values and purpose that kind of the start point. If you believe that children can have a contribution to make, and that you believe in the power of their contribution and the impact of peer working, you would build around that. And that, in terms of what you're seeing, so much of it is tick box. Where I see from the work that you've done with Shireland is you're creating a community that's impacting the community. It has that ambition of changing the world for those young people.
And I think that I absolutely understand you have to have an accountability framework. I just don't understand why it has to be the way we've created it. Actually, we've created something that creates paralysis, and actually what you really want to do is to enable people, and because you're absolutely right, I quite often get asked to go and help in places that are less fortunate than ours, and I think back to a civic duty, we have a responsibility to help if we can. Yes. Because when I've needed help, I've expected someone to come and help, and they absolutely have, and I've been hugely appreciative of that. But I think in the curriculum review, I got to make representation to the team, and one of the things I desperately asked for and reminded everybody of is when we wrote the original national curriculum, government was really, really clear that this was only ever supposed to be at the very most 80% of the week, and the other part of the week was supposed to be about localization, personalization, me as a child, me as a member of staff, me as a member of the community. And what we've done is over-engineered that curriculum experience, because we've just thrown things in so that we can say we're covering it, as against put things in that we know would make a massive difference to young people.
Yes.
And I think, there's lots of things I'd love to be remembered for. There's a few I wouldn't. But actually being a bit of a curriculum rebel and leading an organisation that actually is prepared to go, do you know something? We're simply not going to do that because we don't think it's going to help our children and it's going to disadvantage our staff and community. We have been brave enough to do. And we've had criticism at times, but we sleep better. And the children definitely learn better and achieve better. So what my real hope for the future is that actually we will wake up and go, do you know, if we just designed this better, we wouldn't have the NEET issue that we talk about, because actually those youngsters would be so engaged with what we're doing that actually we wouldn't have that issue. And we wouldn't have an issue in some schools with the sense, why are all of our schools kicking around the mid-90s attendance? Because actually it's worth coming to school. And when you talk to the youngsters, so why do we do better than lots of other schools? The children will tell you, actually, because we do this, this, and this, and I want to do it, and I want to be part of it. So I'm certainly not going to miss it. And there is definitely a piece of work we need to do about developing that confidence and that bravery in our senior leaders. And I also think we've lost the space we used to have of coaching people to design curriculum. Like it's a thing, and it's not a thing. It's very different to that. And I know you know that, but I just don't think there's enough people who are brave enough to either be smart with their curriculum, or be personal with it, or be brave with it. And we need to get that back, because that's my biggest observation of visiting others and having visitors here and speaking to others, is that in other parts of the world, they're being braver than I think some of our settings have been.
Yes.
And I don't think it's just a fluke that when you go to the schools that are struggling, you see the narrowest, most boring, placid delivery, and then you wonder why they've got problems.
Yeah. And I think coming back, I if I took sort of smart curriculum position, the conversations that I've had with 600 leaders around education, I would say I'd validate what you just said. We don't have that skill because people have kind of got lost in a national curriculum structure. That's it. I find other schools, some schools I've been to, that we don't do it if it's not validated by an exam. Even one school I walked into that stopped doing PE because there was no qualification. And you think, well, the children didn't want to go because they never got out of a classroom and they were just stuck in a box. That's the kind of extreme thinking that some have generated. And I find the international schools, exactly as you're saying, are braver, and they're really thinking about curriculum purpose from the point of view of what's the children's perspective, what do they need, what does the region need, the place-based curriculum, all of that. We'll see what Manchesterism does in terms of its view. Yeah. We'll see. Maybe that will change your perspective.
And I think if I'm sure there'll be a change, because I think if there's anything that Andy Burnham has done, Chris, he's definitely been brave enough to say we don't need a one-size-fits-all.
Yes.
And the problem is, for too long in this country, we've accepted the one-size-fits-all is the default position, and then we'll work from this thing.
Yes.
So we desperately need to change. Nearly 20 years ago, I had this really difficult experience. So in Shireland in the autumn term, I would always meet with the new year group that came into our secondary school. So year 7 would be with me, 20 or 30 of them, and I'd just on my own quite often would say, what's good, what's not good, how do I make it better? A little girl welled up and just said, no one knows me, no one knows what I'm good at, no one knows my mum. No one knows what I want to do. The corridors are scary. Everyone's bigger than me. They were right. She was a dot, and a lovely little dot. And I found it really hard. Came out, said to everybody, I'm not doing this again. So I want a different year 7 curriculum by the time we get to next September. I don't understand why we're not, in essence, running a primary model, or at least a middle school model. Why wouldn't we work thematically and actually create the bridge and then taper that bridge? So 2016 to 7, that's what we wrote. We tried a few things. By the time we got to September 2007, Literacy for Life began. And it simply is a thematic delivery that's competency assessed of national curriculum, very well mapped to national curriculum, but in the way that year 6 children would have worked in their school. Specialist maths, in addition to that, some specialist science. You come out to do design and to do arts and to do PE. So all the things that required specialist input, specialist space, and the kids have loved it. And then in year 8, we brought it down to 12 hours, and in year 9, we brought it down to 6 to 7 hours. And we run that across all 5 of our secondary schools, and we don't have a dip in year 7 in terms of anything. So we don't have an attendance dip, we don't have an attainment dip, we don't have participation rate dips, because actually the children feel really well supported, and they're known because they have a single person who works throughout Literacy for Life for them. Of all the things that we've done, it was being brave enough to take that curriculum decision, and then be tenacious enough to implement it as well as we possibly could.
And as a leader, that's the mark, isn't it? I'm sorry to mark. That's the marker of it, that you have the tenacity to put resource, training people, changing mindsets, all of that to make that real. The principle of that young lady who's given you all those things that school isn't to her, you kind of shape it around, well, meeting that need, meeting that desire.
And you can so much of what we all have to do is far too formulaic. So you can either accept somebody else's formula or say, actually, that's great, but that's not for my children. Yeah. What we ought to be doing better, I think, than we've done, is we ought to be having that question of, well, is it fit for purpose for your children? Because if it isn't, we want to help you to make it so. Yes. And that's the with the partners that we've worked with, Chris, over the last heaven knows how many years, and people who've been to see it, you just meet people who go, actually, I want to do this. Right, well, we're quite happy to give you this. We're quite happy to host you. We'll coach you. I think the bit that we then did that was different was we've had a rich use of technology for a long time.
Yes.
So it was just a natural thing all those years ago to pop it online. And because I had the capacity to do that, so we could take this thematic delivery in secondary and pop all the resources online so that they could be shared really well, but also they could be consumed at home. And that was really important to us. Yep. Because whilst I'd like to think we look after the children really well when they're in our care, they're only in my care for a period of time. Yeah. And we wanted more. So we realized really early that actually technology lets, in the same way that things at home invade school, technology lets me invade home. And particularly if we line up the interest of families next door to that sharing of resources. Yeah. So at the same time that we did all the curriculum stuff and the different design and a much more personalized delivery, we harnessed technology to get it out to people and to get their work into here. And that made a huge difference and has continued to make a massive difference.
And I take it from that. I mean, obviously that, in some schools where the parental involvement and interest and engagement with learners is high, again, particularly independent sector, parents are making different decisions, there's not an assumption in there that, you know, children come to school and it's our job and you're not involved. But you've actually, what you're basically saying is you're kind of drawing it back. You're invading the home. You're making the almost mandatory that they are engaged in the process and know what's going on.
Even to the point of creating activities that were completely bagged up and were delivered to home. So the home extension work was family extension work. So you had to do it. In essence, you couldn't do it unless you did it with your family. So, but it was so well supported that it didn't put our families in a position of feeling vulnerable. Because, you know, I think the worst thing that we do sometimes is, I think COVID, we saw awful examples of this. We're going to throw stuff out to homes and presume that you are conceptually confident as a mum and dad or a carer or grandparents or whoever to work with the youngster you really care about. So we tipped that on its head and said, if we're going to design clever stuff for our children, let's design equally clever stuff for our families. And we've got some great examples of when we'll ship out an activity to all of the children in year 5 across all of our primary schools, and we'll get hundreds of pieces of work back. And that there are just so many bits of that we should be proud of, because we're sharing the curriculum, we're sharing the experiences, we're getting you to work with your children, we're not embarrassing you and making it difficult. And away from all the sort of benevolent bits, you're getting hundreds of hours of high quality learning, in addition to what you can do during the normal day.
Yes.
And I do think that's where, when you bring that sort of intersection of relatively clever curriculum design with a clever use, but a simple use of technology, it takes it to a different level.
Yes. And it's not pedestrian conversations about whether there should be social media or not. It's actually using technology for good reason and good purpose. And in fact, you know, can go into family beyond mum and dad, brother and sister. You can do some really interesting stuff. That's really, really positive to hear that, because I hear so much of the technology as it's an evil. It shouldn't be in the school. It shouldn't be in the classroom. And that's
clearly that's not our view.
No, it's not mine either. But
I mean, when you ask me what motivates us to do things, it's always been about leveling playing fields. You know, I think everybody should just have a chance to do stuff, and then they should be encouraged to be brave. So when we create these things, the thing that really makes your heart sing creates an opportunity for youngsters to go after that and do it really, really well. But do it really, really well. Don't put an artificial ceiling on it. And really push the youngsters to get into these things and develop that knowledge, those skills.
So Mark, I'm just going to take a break for a moment. I need to do the sort of socials, but if we can come back and talk about this project around relevance, if we may, in a second. That's the kind of the impetus for the conversation. But I'm just going to just do the element I need to do for the podcast itself. So look, thank you for being here. Really, if you've got conversation that you want to get involved in, or if you want to take it further with Sir Mark, please do contact us through the usual channels, and wherever you're watching this, you can message us at that point. But just that plea, just like, share and subscribe really helps us build the message. And as Sir Mark has said, you know, there are holes in the way that we see learning and creation of learning experiences, and some of the values that we've talked about are really key, certainly to the work that we're doing within Smart Curriculum. So please like, share and subscribe if you're able to. If you're watching this for the first time, get involved in the conversation. The Smart Curriculum Network is out on all of those platforms. I really appreciate your engagement and interested in people's perspectives on this conversation. So Mark, you know, the reason we're having this conversation is around this work on relevance, and I'll perhaps explain a little bit. So Anthony Willoughby and his work with territory mapping. Just tell us a little bit of the story of how that's come about within the Shire Collegiate Academy Trust.
Yeah. So Chris, I think it's just I think Anthony's work and the work on territory mapping and relevance. It's almost one of those things where when you go through the process, you wonder why you never did it before. And I think that's often I think that's probably the best indicator, something that's really quite clever and is actually going to get embedded. So we met Anthony. We knew about some of Anthony's work. We knew about the way he'd created the structure in terms of territory mapping, and then developed the sort of whole Depoto structure. But the first thing I did was use it with my executive team. So with the 8 most senior people in my trust, we all did it. So we all spent a day working with Anthony and some of his colleagues to actually go through the territory map. And I suppose the focus of that was, in a few weeks' time, I retire as the Chief Executive of Shireland. I'm going to still work as an advisor to the board, because we've always felt induction and handing things over is really important. This shouldn't just be a line. So actually, I'm here next year for a period of time to support the new Chief Exec to make sure actually we do this well. Because actually this territory here means a lot to me, so I want to make sure that it evolves and it gets better. But the work with Anthony was fascinating, because I think that whole territory mapping process is such an evocative process and such a personal process. So we did it. We created a whole series of maps, and we used the icons that Andrew introduced to us, which then became part of our vocabulary. And still are part of our vocabulary. Then we decided that actually there were some really key processes that we thought we could take the whole territory map in Depoto process to. So what we've done for the last couple of years is we've used it for transition from year 6 into year 7. We've used it to support the student council structure. And then the other really big one where, and all 3 of these we've seen significant improvements to in all sorts of ways. But the one where I think it was fascinating to watch was we used it for our year 9 students across our trust as they did their options process. Mm-hmm. And that was illuminating, because we had students saying, when my brother did the process, we just kept everything for my mum and dad. But actually, they're a barrier, because I don't want to do what they want to do. And these options aren't their options, they're mine. Yes. And when you gave them a mechanism to do this through the territory mapping process, Chris, we got such really clear and helpful explanations of actually what were really the main the prime sort of movers for the youngsters in terms of how we did. So we changed the process. We've always done careers through primary into secondary. We had part of our thematic delivery was always around careers education, guidance, awareness of all sorts of opportunities, how you work with different partners and different agencies. So I think I'd like to think that our options process was that process was never a process that happened in a few weeks and you picked some things. It was a much more intelligent, personal process. But the territory mapping completely changed it. A lot of the youngsters' maps, and I don't just mean because we did it with everybody. Yeah. So that's the other bit. Again, like I said earlier, when we do things, we do them as a structure, not as an event. So every single youngster in year 9 for the last 2 years has used territory mapping as their process in terms of deciding on their options, and then taken their map home and worked on their map with their families. Now, am I going to say they've all done that as well as each other? No, absolutely not. But there were cohorts that did it really, really well, and they weren't necessarily the ones that people would think. So some of our less confident, some of our youngsters who have some element of special needs and sometimes lack that belief that actually they can get where they want to get, really took to territory mapping. Yeah, and we got some great. We had some great experiences with youngsters. We also found out a lot about ourselves that I'm not sure we would have found out through the process normally. Because when we got the maps and we talked to the children about groups about the maps, we started to see trends of. So you don't think we actually explained this particularly well? Well, why have you never said? Well, because you've never asked. Well, sure we have. If I call it Depoto, the Depoto structure, Chris, has been brilliant. To actually do this and to have a consistent set of icons and terms has made a huge difference. And then what that's led to is even more of a conversation about not just what's relevant for me, but why am I relevant, and how am I going to grow? And that's been wonderful to see. Our student governance works well, serves all of us really well, serves the children well, serves the schools, getting staff well. But actually running it through the Depoto process and the youngsters being able to say, actually, these are the people I go to. This is my community. These are the barriers. This is what I'm really, really bothered about. But I'm not sure how to explain why I'm bothered, because I'm not why I'm concerned, because I'm not sure anything will happen. That's been brilliant. Take that to a student council structure where you've got youngsters who feel empowered to come back and go, do you know something? As a student body, we actually think if we could just make these tweaks to the way that we organise our schools, they'd be even more effective. It's hugely powerful.
And that speaks back to something you said earlier about why children come to school. They feel safe, they feel listened to, they're involved in the process. So, it's going to have a positive impact on the whole process, whatever happens.
So the Charlton Collegiate Academy, where I was principal and where I'm still based, because one of the other rather weird things, Chris, is I don't allow us to have offices anywhere for our MAT. We're all school-based.
Right, yes.
I think we should be school-based. I don't. So we're around school all the time, and that's been that's been. So students are regularly coming to us and saying, we could improve our process if we just did this, this, and this. And you want that feedback, don't you?
Yeah.
That's the way you get better.
Well, we call that student voice, and it becomes another tick somewhere. But if it's reality, it's lived and it's listened to, and that process is. Can I just so Depoto in itself is an African word for wealth, and it's the sense of what is value to me. That's what Anthony Willoughby has kind of built. The kind of language that we talk about, you've just referred to, and it's so great to hear. So the fireside, the people I trust, the people that I need in my circle of trust, the barriers, the mountains that I'm climbing, the swamps that stop me, all of that kind of language is formulated into this process. So what we're talking about, Depoto, is all of that. And I think, one of the things that I've seen in the process, this whole idea of the neurodiverse, that the ability for many different children to express, or even adults to express their kind of feelings, their emotions around what they're experiencing, it puts it in a different way rather than, it's not an essay, and it's not, I'm not asking you to stand up and do something. And we've seen huge numbers of communities expressing their, Indigenous wisdom, community focused, some deprived children, some children that school refuses, all expressing the journey they've been on.
And we've got everybody that you've just mentioned. We've then got different leadership teams. We've got different delivery teams. We've got we've got a behaviour attendance hub where Charlton Collegiate Academy is one of the behaviour attendance hubs, where actually we got the children just to show how they'd used Depoto and why they felt actually Anthony's process had made even more of our children understand actually the relevance of school and their relevance in school. And then, at the end of the last presentation, which was a couple of weeks ago, inevitably the visitors will say, so your attendance is 97% in an inner city secondary school, where if we look at other schools that would be similar, it might be 10% lower. Why is it different? And to hear children say, well, why wouldn't you come? Why wouldn't you come? Because actually you get to do this, this, and this. I'm asked to help with this. I feel important. I feel like I'm a part of a family of that where I belong, and I've got something to offer. Yes. And then you stop yourself. You put the conversation on pause, and you think it can't be that simple. But actually, it probably is that simple.
Yes.
The bit with the whole Depoto territory mapping, Chris, is that we've absolutely seen with everybody is that common vocabulary and that common structure means that you get that it just brings the process together, but it makes it an inclusive process for everybody, irrespective of almost your age and ability, because it's not a difficult structure to gather around.
No, no.
And I think there's a really clever element of that. It's not super sophisticated. It's very intuitive, and it's very personal. So we've watched year 4 operate the territory mapping probably as well as our sixth form, and probably as well as my senior leaders.
Yes.
And I think sometimes when we run processes in settings like ours, we almost want it to be more complicated for different groups, because it sort of justifies, well, you're running an executive team because it's really clever, insightful process, and you'd run a watered down process with perhaps 4-year-olds, and I think it begs the question, why? If it's a really clever process that's going to make a real difference, why does it need to be a super complicated and diluted? And actually, the Dipoto structure was shown as the complete opposite of that. Everyone's just used the same process. It's really it's been fascinating watching very senior staff talk to early years children about what they're doing, and it's a great thing to do.
Yes. And that all of that, the simplicity, the straightforwardness, and doesn't have to be age specific, as you've said. The level of sophistication internally might be approaching a management problem against a child in a classroom that's got just an experiential problem, using the toilet, getting some water, finding their equipment, whatever that might be. It's the same barrier kind of conversation, isn't it?
I mean, and this is not to exaggerate. I think Dipoto has been one of the most significant introductions to our trust in the last couple of years, because everybody can see its place and everybody can see the benefit. So it's suddenly become one of those things on a par with our use of technologies. Pretty good. Copilot, generative AI. We do a lot of work, but those things will never actually get to where we want them to get unless you've got those very human things around. And the whole territory mapping Dipoto structure is really human and really personal.
So it's worth us saying now, obviously there'll be more information coming out during the summer, but we're running a conference in September, based at Shirelands, where we'll be looking at that, the application of it, the examples, hopefully seeing some of the learners and their engagement, and the parents and the families, and how that's worked for them. So there'll be more detail to follow in terms of dates and processes, but where we're speaking now, watch out for those details, because we will be hopefully it will be broadcast too, so if you don't see it at the time, you'll be able to pick up on those details, and there will be some contact details that we'll share through the posts, and for people to get involved in.
And Chris, one of the bits that we're playing with at the moment, I'm not sure that's the right word, but we're actually trying to take Dipoto, into Minecraft, and see whether we can actually let youngsters manipulate the icons in a Minecraft environment, and actually almost create their territory mapping in 3 dimensions through a Minecraft world. So we've been working with a couple of other agencies and the support of Microsoft to actually make this work. That would be fascinating if we could make that work. One of there's lots of things. I think all schools do some different stuff. Just we're not very good sometimes at showcasing that to other people. But most of my schools have got an immersive space. Right. So this came from some youngsters saying, why can't we take Dipoto into Minecraft, into the immersive space? What a great idea. So that's what we're currently trying to do.
I kind of rings of the Ken Robinson, we take creativity out of it. Just get the ideas, use the ideas, flow with the ideas, and see where it takes us.
Yeah, I mean, there's a name that who inspires you? Tim Brinkhouse, Mick Waters, Ken, absolutely. I had the pleasure of working with Ken for a while. I just thought there was some amazing stuff. Ken's, I think the best, people like Ken make you feel guilty you haven't done it, even though you've only heard it 30 seconds ago.
Yeah.
I think there's a real skill in that.
Yeah.
And he absolutely made those of us that got to work with him. It makes you be brave, which is what the children absolutely deserve.
I just speaking back to what you said earlier about that, we've got into this mindset of almost compliance and tick boxing, and actually what I'd love to see, and the leaders I was working with yesterday and Monday of this week, just they have been brave, and they've kind of exactly as you said earlier, in a sense, okay, that may be how you see it at a government level, but on the ground, I'm going to be brave and prove that this needs to work for my children. And I guess there's the resilience that comes out, the tenacity, the character, that I know what's best for my learners and I'm going to do well by them. That's that brave approach is worth encouraging.
And I sort of hoped when I saw the the evolving new Ofsted framework that almost exceptional practice would trump some of the compliance.
Yes.
Because it's so sequential, we're not going to get there yet.
No.
And that's such a shame, because I do think across the world, all the schools and school systems are being much braver and just accepting that actually, if you really want to push something to this level, if you don't work in a different structure and environment, you can't do it. You're going to keep the legacy structures, which we know are very compliant, fairly dull, but really safe. You're not going to be able to get here. It's one of the things that we seem to spend a lot of time helping people with at the moment around technology, and around actually how they can use AI, because what is happening is people are becoming fearful of, well, what if it all goes wrong? Yeah, but if you do it in the right way and you create a proper structure, what if it all goes right? And actually, you can get youngsters able to do all sorts of things with the different form of skills in a different way. Because I think, if not, at some point, a bit like we've had with the NEETs, where we've woken up and said, how come we got so many NEETs? Oh, yes, but we had an English baccalaureate stop them from doing most of the subjects they liked. We might wake up in so many years' time going, how come we've got lots of youngsters who don't have the skill set to pursue the careers that they could have had we embraced this in a completely different way? And that's not to be careless and to remove the structure that's really important, but it's to acknowledge that actually some of this has got to change. It's got to change.
Yes.
Because it absolutely is in other parts of the world. Other parts of the world are looking at where we're going to go and saying, I can skip a generation of mistakes by actually creating a different structure here and empowering our youngsters, still in a very safe structure, but I can absolutely do it.
And some of that is, it's still, good literate skills, good numeric skills, absolutely. High levels of oracy, because actually what the fact that a child can articulate to you, this isn't working well, is there a way that we could do that better, rather than just complaining and saying it, and walking away. The fact that they were able to articulate it and it made sense and you were able to do something with it is actually is an amazing feat from a child's point of view.
And we're doing a lot of work on oracy and done some work with Voice 21, and when year 6 asked what they wanted to show, the Voice 21 team that came into work in a couple of our schools, the children said, my Depoto work, my territory mapping.
Wow, right.
Because I can talk to that as well as I can talk to anything. Yes. So I think I suppose it's a bit like I hoped we did when we created Literacy for Life and its primary equivalent. Create that coherence and that framework of things fitting together, and you get that multiplier effect.
Yeah.
Almost create a curriculum in a box and have about a dozen of them that don't join together. And not only have you got an awful experience for children, but you've got a bureaucratic nightmare where you spend more of your time worrying about, excuse me, have I done everything? And less about, have I made a massive difference for everybody?
And actually the question, and I know, the thing, I've only ever worked in big schools, so 3,500 children in, as it would have been in the school that I did my last post in. And the question of have I done everything wasn't necessarily compliant and whatever, but did all of those 3,500 children get the experience that's now set them up for life? Now there's a question there, and you can go and ask them yourself. But that's the journey. I just reflecting on, as you were saying that, so Mark, I know that. I know they're anecdotal, and the territory mapping Depoto process has been used in a number of different contexts. But I can think of the young lady, and I'm not going to name her here, but the selective mute that was worked through with the territory mapping process. Actually, at the end of the process, started talking because she felt that she'd got a voice. That a young lady that was able to shape all of the barriers that were even through the health service and the education service and social services and all of the people around her, the first point at which she had the ability to say something was there on that page.
And I mean, we're obviously going through a massive transformation in our country in terms of SEND. But on the bits of work that I've been involved with, one of the things I've asked, and I'm not getting a really great answer, is do I understand all of the compliance framework and how this is going to work and our statutory responsibilities? How would it feel different for the children?
Yes.
And it's almost like don't ask that question because that's not relevant. No, it absolutely is.
Yes.
How will it be different? How will your young lady who's an elected mute suddenly feel in a completely different place so she can feel better and contribute in the way that she wishes to? And if all of our SEND reforms are only really about the compliance and the statutory bit and the relationship between academies like mine and the local authority, but it doesn't make any difference on the ground in the delivery to young people. And it clearly will. And in the best places, it clearly will.
Yes.
But this is, I think, all these things are sort of the yin and yang. There's got to be the compliance bit. And it's really important that we can ensure that everyone's safe and all these things are in place that should be in place. But if the other part of this, which is that I get an amazing experience that gets the best from me as an individual, it's on the back burner while I do this, I might never get there.
Yes.
And that would be desperately sad. I suppose, to come back to an earlier point in the conversation, I think we've lost the skill of teaching people to think about how they create great, rich experiences for young people, i.e. how to design clever curriculums.
Yeah. And I would articulate that as setting out your design principles. And those principles might be that you have entitlements, or it might be that you're committed to a particular set of things that you want, and particularly experiences we seem to be setting in. And as leaders, that we work on principle-led leadership, that's where you go. And I hear that from you, Sir Mark, that you've done that across all of your schools. You've set your principles and you live by them.
Chris, we've tried.
Well, within a system, of course, there are always going to be challenges, and nothing stands still, does it? So you
no. And there's I think there's one of the bits that you referred earlier to. Sometimes I go to help places that aren't as fortunate as we are. I think one of those recurring things that you see is that people aren't encouraged to stay in a place and really learn their community and learn their craft, and you must hop around to do a really good job and to be rewarded is a weakness in our system. In all sorts of ways, and it doesn't matter whether it's public servants like us or it's civil servants who support our architecture in a country like ours. If actually the only way I can do better is do 3 years and hop somewhere else, I never get to finish some stuff that's really important for the people who are the recipients of this. And then in the great places where I've been at times, there's just the people have been there longer, and if they haven't been there longer, the essence of what they do has, and people have stuck to it, and you can just see it's a really mature, great fit for the community that they serve. Somehow we need to find a better way to reward our systems in terms of public service for maintaining not a status quo, but creating consistency that you can build upon. And
I think that the words that you used earlier about creating frameworks rather than creating tick boxes. So just, we know the money needs to be spent wisely. We know that it needs to provide an education across the piece. But whichever community I've ever been to, there's just come out of Blackpool. Blackpool is Blackpool, and so you need to make sure you've said your area of Birmingham. I think about some of the other coastal places I've been that will say, well, this community is different. There may be characteristics where we want a system to deliver, but that commitment to it and that succession within that organisation, within those places, is so important.
Yeah. And the best of what we do is really good. It's there are some amazing institutions in this country. There's some brilliant practice. I think we just need occasionally just to pause a few of the things we do and think, how do I enable more people to have the brilliance?
Yes.
And less people to spend all their time worrying about a visit. And if we could do that, we could make a huge difference. And that's sort of my hope of what you've seen with the Manchester Baccalaureate, what you've seen in a sub-region. If we could create a bit more managed flexibility, some of those issues that have become really big issues could be far less of an issue for us. Like we've had with the curriculum and needs and all sorts. We really shouldn't be too shocked.
In our conversation, we're getting close to the end, and it's actually, we've had an hour of conversation. It's been really, really great to talk to you. I usually ask at the end of the conversation, if there was one thing that you could change or see differently, what would it be? What would you focus on? I think you've alluded to some of it, perhaps, in things that you've said, but if you could summarize that in one kind of parting word.
I think, Chris, the problem with this is that they're going, it's so predictable. I think make accountability about individual young people, as against comparing institutions the way that we've done. So actually somehow judge my schools on do we do a really good job for young people, and also do we deliver what they need, not what we've told them they need. So my two big frustrations are, I desperately wanted a curriculum review that created a bit more flexibility and welcomed people into that flexibility, and I don't think I've seen it yet, but I'm always hopeful. And then I think when you create that flexibility, apply an accountability framework to that, because you and I could walk into almost anywhere, Chris, and we wouldn't know whether it was great or not.
Yes.
We wouldn't have to shock them by saying we're not going to tell you when we're coming, so we're going to terrorize you for heaven knows how long. We could be polite enough to say we're going to come in, we're going to come in May. We're going to see you, show us your best stuff. Because to be honest, if they're not doing very good stuff, then probably still not going to be doing very good stuff, even if you tell them you're coming. But then take things to them that says, actually, but I've also seen this amazing stuff. The problem of divorcing improvement from accountability is that you've got two processes where I think there's loads of places in the world are now saying, actually, that's not a very wise way to do it.
Yes.
Much better to do it as a one, so that actually you've got people who know what they're looking for, but can also say, what you've done is really good, but have you thought of this, this, and this? And the fact that we've got some of the most gifted, not always, but there are, I think, I'm a huge fan of most of His Majesty's Inspectorate, because I think if they've chosen to do that, my experience is they're very good. They're insightful, and then we create a structure where some of the most insightful people in the school system can't express to me how they think they could make what we're doing better.
Yeah,
that's my frustration of get rid of. So take the handcuffs off the system and really make it help us to get better.
That's a really important point, and it is just that, if we want a school improvement service, we want to improve the system, we want all these things to happen, then give the people that have got that insight the freedom to do it. That's and I'm with you. I know, speaking of other systems, Northern Ireland, Estin, what's going on, and then the further afield, it really is about school improvement. And that, I know the joy of going into a team that are doing brilliantly and saying, well, have you thought of this? And then just see that light bulb come on. And no, we haven't. But actually, that's we could see how that would work. That's just empowering, and that's a great pleasure. So, Mark, I am so grateful for the conversation. Thank you so much for your insights. And one, we wish you well in your retirement.
Thank you, Chris.
Not to lose your knowledge and understanding to the system. So thank you. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you.
Real pleasure. Thank you. So thank you to Sir Mark for the conversation this morning on Friday Focus. I wish you well where you are through the summer, whether you're breaking up and taking some rest over the summer and then looking to the new academic year. Have a great summer. We appreciate you being here with us. Get involved in the conversation. Please still like, share, subscribe, follow us, whichever channel that you're using. We appreciate you being here, and we'll see you again soon.